Okay, well, today's webinar we'll be discussing family members and AOT. And let's see, just a basic overview of our agenda. We will begin with introductions, and then we'll be discussing family members and their journey with severe mental illness and family members with and AOT. Gina will have a discussion on her personal experience with working with family members, and we'll be then discussing NAMI Kansas family resources. And towards the end is when we will have, we'll post up an evaluation link on the chat box, and then we will, once you fill out that evaluation, then we'll send out the link for the CEU and the CEU password, and that will be at the end of the presentation. So in the chat box, if you could put in your name, your role with AOT and the county that you're in. To introduce our NAMI Kansas team, I'm Itzel Moya, the NAMI Kansas AOT project director. Then we have Gina Anderson. She is the Ellis County AOT specialist. We have Christopher Hagel. He is from the AOT specialist in Douglas County. We have Amy Fowler. She's an AOT specialist in Cowley County and Sumner County. And then not here with us today is Kathy Bunnell, and she is the AOT specialist with there in Riley County. So okay. So our objectives for our presentation today are to hopefully for everyone have a better understanding on how family members are impacted by severe mental illness, and an understanding of their role in AOT, the AOT process, and learning more about NAMI Kansas resources that are available for family members. So, as most of us know, but severe mental illness, or SMI, this is defined as a person over the age of 18 who has or has had within the past year a diagnosable mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder that causes serious functional impairment that substantially interferes with or limits one or more major life activities. And as we work with AOT participants, it's mostly individuals that have an SMI. And these SMIs are typically what we see as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depression. And these are typically conditions that tend to be chronic and relapsing in nature. And with that is oftentimes where we see that revolving door that we often discuss in AOT, which is that constant hospitalization, constant incarceration, or other issues to their quality of life. And according to a 2022 report that Mental Health America recently published, about 20.78% of adults experience mental illness, and that's the equivalent of 50 million Americans. And out of those, we have 5.44% experience severe mental illness. And with keeping that in mind, oftentimes as providers or individuals working in the mental health field, we think about our participants, our clients, our consumers, those with the peer with the mental illness, and they are the priority and the ones that receive the individualized help. But sometimes we need to take a step back as individuals working in the mental health field and also think about their support system that revolves them and also the difficulties that they are facing. So in this presentation will be out of the kind of the perspective of the family member and how the family member is impacted, how the family member can be supportive for their loved one, and resources that the family member can obtain. And the way we're defining family member is how the Treatment Advocacy Advocacy Center TAC, how they define family member in most of their published work. And a family member is used as a kind of a broad term that includes parents, siblings, spouses, adult children, partners, significant others, or close friends. And families can be of origin, biological families or families of choosing, because we also oftentimes see that in the participants that we're working with. Their family, their drug support system is sometimes people that are not biologically related to them. And with NAMI, we often like to a phrase that we use often is "you are not alone," and this includes when we are working with a peer with a mental illness, but this also includes family members and what they face. Um, and with family members or caregivers, they often, if they're involved with the family member's recovery journey, they often play a large role in helping and supporting their loved one. And we see this, as we saw in the previous slide, there's an estimated amount of 50 million people living with mental illness in the United States. And what we need to stop and consider is, out of these individuals, how are their support systems, their family members, how are they also being impacted? And with the resources at NAMI, what we like to remind individuals that they are not alone. There's people everywhere that are also struggling with similar issues, and they're impacted in similar ways. So what we have first is, how are family members impacted? And I begin by discussing how their physical wellness is impacted. Uh, So physical problems are significantly higher in family members of people with an SMI than family members of individuals who don't have SMI. And this is information from a report that was on the multidimensional impact of severe mental illness on family members. And what we often see is that family members, they experience higher sleep problems. So they're at 42% versus at 28% for an individual that doesn't have a family member with SMI. They also see a higher prevalence of pain, and that pain includes physical pain. Then we have headaches. They experience 48% headaches compared to the 42% of an individual without loved one with SMI. And then also heartburn. We see that in a higher prevalence in family members with an individual with an SMI. And these physical impacts that family members often see are they sometimes come due to stress, as we all know. So emotional impacts more than likely will eventually cause some sort of physical issues. And what we have next is that explaining that emotional well-being. And with family members, they see an increase in stress, anxiety, guilt, and depression. And this oftentimes is very, very strong and prevalent right after diagnosis. So during that immediate period right after an individual is diagnosed, or that initial period after an individual has experienced higher they're having higher symptoms when it comes to the mental illness, that's a period that is very difficult on their loved ones, their family members. And typically during these early stages, we see family members face a lot of distress. And with this distress, it comes with the anxiety of really the anxiety of not knowing what is going on. They don't know how to help their loved one. They're confused on resources, on what to do. And we also start seeing that it starts affecting them with stress. And stress we see comes out of stigma. So most of the times there's that stigma that correlates with mental illness, and especially right after diagnosis or right after seeing an increase in some sort of symptom, a family member might feel that stigma a lot more, especially if we see that a lot more in minority populations. And when thinking about the well-beings of family members and how they're impacted, it's important to also think about their cultural differences and how this might be affecting them. And with stress also comes the financial stress. So a lot of the times, a family member, we have more expenses when it comes to appointments, medication, or just if they're at the beginning of their journey, they're just trying to figure something out, which it could include a lot more appointments. And if the family member is a provider for the person with the mental illness, this stress is mounted onto them. And oftentimes we see a higher prevalence of guilt. And this guilt comes from if it's a parent and their child has a mental illness, we see that guilt of, well, what did I do wrong that caused my child to experience this? Um, and it comes in with children, the adult children of someone with a mental illness. What, are we not supporting our parents enough? What is going on? So we see that initial guilt, and that guilt tends to linger on until throughout the family's journey until they have more resources and they better understand the situation at hand. And then we have a higher prevalence of depression in those family members with a loved one with severe mental illness. And often see that hopelessness, that shame, that isolation coming, that an individual after that first initial distress that they go through right after diagnosis, then other feelings start settling in, and sometimes those includes the feelings of helplessness, of shame and isolation, and it could lead into a family member also experiencing depression or more mental health uh, symptoms of their own. And as we discussed with that stress, that financial stress, we see a high prevalence of of impact on the financial well-being of an individual, of that caregiver or family member, and it correlates to costs related to care. And often what we see is, again, those appointments, that medication, anything else that directly correlates to their recovery journey. We also have other costs in case a family member cannot financially provide for themselves, then that is is a financial burden that's then placed on their family member. And that also, their productivity is impacted because they sometimes, depending on the severity of the loved one with the mental illness, a family member might not be able to go to work. Some individuals, they have to retire early, they decide to dedicate more of their time to their loved one with the mental illness, and that reduces their ability to work. And oftentimes what we see is family members also, they provide transportation to these appointments. They're there to be supportive, but that does lead to other stresses. Um, and what we've seen is that 32.5% of households with someone with a severe mental illness um, has experienced food insecurity compared to 15.9% of the general population. And that also comes with the inability to maybe work a regular work schedule or work as many hours as a person used to. And sometimes, depending on when first episode was with the loved one, uh, it could be a change. Maybe the loved one used to work and now you're going down to just a one income household. And that financial well-being impacts the family member. And then we have the impact of the social well-being of a family member. And with that, we have stigma, discrimination, strayed family environments, and loss of relationships. So, with stigma, unfortunately, mental health stigma, we see it everywhere. And in with different cultures in families, we also see that discrimination and stigma kind of together, and it's difficult for families. Oftentimes, that is also what adds that strain to the family relationship. So we have a loved one with a mental illness, and they all of a sudden the entire family unit is going through added stress, and because that includes the financial system changing, maybe the support system is changing a little, and included the that you might be facing some stigma or discrimination from even extended family neighbors. What we often see in the Asian and Hispanic communities, whenever someone has a mental illness, it's they're public with it, they tend to other individuals outside of that family unit tend to steer away from the family because they're not sure of what's causing this or the impacts it could have on other people. And then with that, we also have that loss of relationships. So family members oftentimes we have it's difficult for them to balance their work and their social life and maybe the everything that their loved one with a mental illness has going on. That includes their appointments, that includes maybe any support groups that they might be attending, and it's difficult to for them to really learn how to balance everything out. And we see these strains and these impacts a lot more prevalent when during that onset of that diagnosis and early in their journey. And oftentimes family members, they feel isolated, and this is tends to be because of lack of the information, support, and training that they are receiving. And especially during that early onset of whatever diagnosis a loved one has, we most family members are confused. They don't know who to talk to, they don't know who to reach out to, and they oftentimes maybe they've noticed their family member shifting. It's something's going on, but they don't know what it could be. So then they also have that personal guilt of, well, I should have noticed this earlier, and something else is happening. So towards the beginning of the family's journey, we see them really isolating themselves and wondering what they could do to help their loved one during this. And with NAMI, we have a couple of tips when it comes to supporting recovery as a family member. And I So these are the things. So right after you receive a diagnosis as a family member, you're really wondering, what can I do? How can I be supportive without being too supportive? Because we often see that family members want to be present for their loved one, but they also don't want to maybe overwhelm them too much. So the first thing a family member could do, and that's always recommended, is to learn as much as possible about mental health and your family's members' condition. If an individual is diagnosed with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or that major depression, really learning about what does that consist of, what should I be looking for, um, and there's a lot of great resources online, and you could also talk to the provider of your loved one and really know what you should be looking out for. And this is a little different for everyone, but showing interest in the family member's treatment plan. Um, and this it all depends. As we know, it's difficult to not everyone signs off a consent form, but that doesn't mean that you can't just learn more about the situation in general. If you don't know anything about schizophrenia, then going out and like, what should I be learning? Do you have any informational brochures, or are there any classes you recommend that I take to help? So any interest in that, and then encouraging your family member to follow that treatment plan. And this could include offering transportation to therapy sessions, or it could be reminding them to take medications as prescribed. It could be reminding them of, hey, remember, you're meeting with your case manager today, or don't forget to talk to your peer support specialist. It could be little things as those reminders, but always being mindful of not pushing too far. Oftentimes, family members at the beginning of their journey, they're either really excited to finally get help for their loved one, or they're confused, stressed out, maybe a little angry with the situation. And it's very easy for a family member to start maybe pushing a little too hard on this recovery journey. So it's important to encourage family members to follow their treatment plan, but at the discretion of knowing that you're not pushing them too much. And then we have striving for an atmosphere of cooperation with the family. Especially if this is the family unit that lives together, it's important that everyone in the household knows what is going on, how to help the person, or what triggers to look for. That those conversations have to be held within the family. It means communicating with the family members and communicating with a loved one with a mental illness. Um, so that includes listening carefully. And sometimes just simply listening to your loved one with a mental illness, that's all the support that they need. And truly listening to them and not really speaking out or interrupting them while they're discussing their story, just sitting down, listening to them, and offering any validation or support that they might be really requiring during that time. And something that's super important is expressing your support out loud. And oftentimes, that spoken encouragement can reduce the stress levels of our loved ones. And with the AOT process, I'm sure we all have witnessed that how motivation and that validation of an individual really helps them during their journey. And that is also something that family members can have in mind. Uh, Oft out loud, I'm proud of you for going to therapy, or I'm proud of you for taking your medication, always helps an individual. And importantly, it's important to have a crisis plan prepared. And if there's a crisis plan prepared, making sure that everyone in that household knows what to do when in crisis. And it's important to include important numbers in that crisis plan, like numbers to the case manager, peer support, maybe your local CIT team, anyone that you know would be vital during a time of crisis, and be knowledgeable of this plan within your family members and include your loved one in that conversation. So they also know if something ever goes wrong, my family is prepared and they're supporting me through all this. And with knowing what family members experience during SMI and how they're impacted, I would like to move forward into discussing family members and AOT. And this is a conversation that maybe is held with some family members. With AOT, most of the participants are adults or over 18, and maybe they don't want their family members to be involved, and that's okay. When you first see someone during the intake session or when they're getting started with AOT, we ask those questions, that those supportive environments, or if there's anyone else that you would like to send a release to. And a lot of the times, towards the beginning of everyone's journey throughout AOT or mental health in general, they're really hesitant towards involving family members and such. But getting family members, if it's a healthy environment, is not a bad thing. It's good to have family members at the table, kind of discussing, being able to give information that maybe a regular provider couldn't know because the participant wasn't aware of that, or they don't know about their triggers, or maybe it was a time period that they were just weren't really aware of what's going on, but their family member knows. When you do have a family member that is involved about AOT, or maybe they're just wondering what AOT is and how they could help their loved one throughout this journey, TAC, the Treatment Advocacy Center, has a published document on like what should family members know about AOT. And when learning more about AOT, we start off with explaining what it is. And I know most individuals, they probably have never heard about AOT. They don't know the process and might be confused. So sitting down with a family member, if they are involved with the process, sitting them down and explaining what AOT is. And in that document TAC has, they break it down step by step, explaining what AOT could be in the process, and also explaining how does it work. They might have the family member might have some questions of the treatment plan or the process of AOT, like for example, the court dockets or anything else their loved one is doing with their AOT process. So really sitting down, explaining how it works. Um, and some family members, they might not know much about HIPAA. They might or might not. It always depends on where they are in their journey. But during this conversation, it probably will be important to discuss HIPAA and letting the individual know, that family member, that as providers, you cannot share information without consent. So they cannot call you, they cannot send an email, go in person, ask wanting to know more details about their loved one's process in AOT if that consent form isn't signed. But a family member can provide the treatment team with any information without that consent, and you could let the family member know. They could go in person, they could give a call, they could maybe write something down and deliver it. And this includes if they have concerns, if they don't know much about AOT and it's a concern about AOT, if they could speak up and ask more questions about that. If they know some vital information like triggers or anything else that might be important during the process, we could also include that, letting the family member know that as a family member, you can reach out, give this information, but as providers, we cannot give you information back without consent. And the big question that a lot of family members have is what happens when my loved one doesn't adhere to the treatment plan? Because oftentimes, depending on what their journey is, family members have seen their loved ones go into the state hospital or go into jail for something that's happened. And they might have that fear of like, well, this has happened before. My loved one suffered because they ended up in jail or the state hospital, whatever it could be. So really sitting down with them and explaining this is what's going to happen if your family member doesn't adhere to AOT in that treatment plan, and letting them know it's nothing too big. It's not anything that they should worry about their loved one's safety. And that would more than likely help the loved one with their stress and then answer any questions in regards to that. And most family members, they truly like, depending on their relationship, what they have with their loved one, they like to be supportive of their loved one with a mental illness and their recovery journey in mental health. Um, so there's different ways that a loved one could be supportive in AOT, and it also does depend on the treatment team. So there is a possibility if the treatment team is comfortable with it, and so is a participant, where a family member could attend the AOT hearings. And it's important to note and tell the family member if they are present at an AOT hearing, it is there as support for their loved one with a mental illness. They're not there to share anything out loud or anything that maybe could trigger the loved one in any way. They're just there to be supportive. During that time, if a family member does have anything that they've noticed here recently, maybe any shifts, letting them know that they can explain their concerns, but to not do it during the time of an AET hearing. This could be done before or afterwards, just to be in communication with the treatment team. And when it comes to participating in the development of the treatment plan, that doesn't exactly mean that they have to sit down with the treatment team and help develop that treatment plan. Oftentimes, what we see is that family members know triggers or know any other vital information that could help with the treatment team, like medication that they've taken in the past. So just asking family members important questions like medication questions, triggers, or daily routines that could help the treatment team create that treatment plan. And that ties into notifying the treatment team when you have concerns. So as family members, they're going to notice when something's wrong. Sometimes they might be the first ones to notice, and being able to have that open line of communication of let me call the case manager or the AOT liaison and letting them know that these are my concerns because something's happening right now. It could be very vital for the process of a loved one in AOT. And encouraging your loved one to share medication concerns with the treatment team. This could be sometimes in a casual conversation, the loved one with a mental illness might say something like, "Oh, I've gained a lot of weight and I don't like it," or "This medication is making me dizzy," and the family member could jot down those concerns and then they could share it with with the medical provider or anyone in the treatment team, so they could relay it on. Because sometimes that's important to know if there's any concerns regarding medication because we don't want to discourage the loved one from taking that medication. And also recognizing and celebrating improvement. Again, it's very important to provide that validation and that motivation to your loved one and their AOT journey. You know, it's good that you're going to therapy. I'm glad you're taking your medication. Anything like that would be very insightful for your loved one. And with that ties in providing emotional support. So anytime the loved one is experiencing something, being that safe space where they could go talk to you as their family member and hopefully their support system. And then if that information is important, they're relaying it on to the treatment team. So again, keeping those open lines of communication. And importantly, taking care of yourself and recognizing your limitations. So, any family member, you have to take care of yourself physically and mentally in order to take care of someone else. So, that's something to always keep in mind. And most importantly, having realistic expectations. AOT is sometimes not for everyone, and everyone's journey is different. So a person isn't going to go into an AOT program and then be completely okay in 3, 4 months. Explaining to the family member that this is how it might look, and this is what we could do to help you out. So as a family member, really setting realistic expectations of the process and the journey that your loved one will take. And one of those important things is becoming a community advocate for AOT. So if you've noticed that your loved one with a severe mental illness, they are enjoying AOT, they made a lot of improvement in their recovery when it comes to the mental illness, then start advocating for AOT. And this could be done at the community level, letting other community members know, like, hey, this is happening here and it's awesome. It's helped my son. You could take it over to the state level, like during an advocacy day. You know, I'm an advocate for AOT. I've seen what it does, and that's awesome. So a lot of times family members, they like to give back. And sometimes that the best way they could give back is by advocating for programs like AOT and advocating for mental health in the community. And I had to include this graphic in here. If whoever was at the AOT symposium in 2022 in San Antonio, you might have seen this. And it's what do family members want out of AOT? And this graphic was created after a conversation with family members with individuals with severe mental illness and individuals that have gone through the AOT process. And the answers that they received were then put into this graphic. Families are helpers. Um, Respect my family member, culturally appropriate resources and care, knowing that it's not your fault, and other things that they're communicating. And this graphic is available on the tag website. I could send it out if anyone wants to. I always like sharing it out. It's colorful and it has really a lot of good points. So breaking down one of the important things that are included in that graphic, it's that family members that are involved with AOT, they want to help end that stigma against severe mental illness. And this again includes probably by advocating and letting everyone know, hey, AOT works, and I'm so happy my family members involved. Then we have the collaboration with the treatment team, if permitted. Again, a lot of family members, they feel isolated, they don't feel supported, they feel confused, especially at the beginning of the diagnosis of their journey. So if they're able to collaborate with the treatment team, if that means just communicating their concerns, family members are highly appreciative of that. With that ties in being able to be heard and consulted about mental health history. They more than likely, the family members, they know the history, they know all these initial triggers and such. That might be important information when when making a a treatment plan. And they also want to partner with the system to prevent a crisis, not wait for a crisis to finally force the system to respond. And this means really advocating for change and not waiting till something bad happens to finally see a result out of that. And most importantly, and I have mentioned it before, that culturally appropriate care. We have to be very mindful of individuals and their cultures whenever we're working with them, not just with AOT, but really mental health in general. And as treatment uh, important things to consider as a treatment team, and that includes as an AOT liaison, therapist, case manager, anyone really that's involved, is to be able family members to cope with daily life. They wish to cope with daily life and stay intact. Families need support, communication, education, and resources. And this quote was directly taken from a presentation that was given during the AOT 22 symposium. So, as family members, we want providers and AOT teams to meet us where we are with grace and understanding when it is often the worst point in our family's journey. So most of the time when a family member or someone in AOT or family is involved with AOT, they're at some part of their mental health journey where maybe they've gone through a lot and it's been difficult on the participant. But if they have a present family support system, it more than likely has been difficult on the family as well. And that's something we need to consider as treatment providers, making sure that somehow family members are supported, we're hearing them, there's that communication, and we're able to provide education and resources. And NAMI, as NAMI, we do have several resources for family members. And I think that's always important to keep in mind. But with that, I will switch over to Gina because Gina has some great points to make as she's worked with family members. Sorry, Gina, you're muted.
I've taught family to family class, which is a NAMI signature program for families. And one of the first things we see is by the time the family reaches out for help, they're frustrated, they're defeated, they don't think there's any hope, and they're a lot of times they're angry at their loved one because they don't know what they can do. So in a family to family class, we have it used to be 12 weeks, now it's 8 weeks. And what we teach there is how to problem solve and communicate effectively. When you're dealing with a parent, a sibling, a loved one, and the who is above 18, a lot of times um, family members are they feel excluded, and some of that is, you know, um, so that the person with the mental illness can get the help that they need without fear that everything will be broadcast to their family. Because it usually by the time they are willing to work with family to family or talk about it, they've had it, up to their nose, and they just don't have any hope. They don't think that it's going to get any better. Um, and when we bring people to family, this 8 week course, what we find or what they find is the fact that they're not the only ones dealing with it. And usually the group is like 12 to 15 people, maybe 16. Um, and so you're talking about they're in there with maybe 8 other family members who are dealing um, with the exact same emotions of being of at their wits' end of what to do. Um, I know that in my case, back in the 60s, when my brother had his mental illness, had his break, um, my parents didn't have a clue what to do. NAMI wasn't involved yet. I was only 10 years old. And, my parents spent a lot of time trying to blame each other's side of the family because they didn't have any understanding. One of the other, the next course that we take is how to take care of yourself in this process and manage your own stress. There again, by the time family members are willing to reach out and get help, they are usually up to their ears, and they don't know how to do anything. They have been told by the mental health centers that, I'm sorry, we can't talk to you. Your son or daughter, your loved one won't sign a consent form. And we have all this information. And, I try to emphasize to them that they can talk to the mental health center. The mental health center can listen, they just can't respond. And that is okay. That's still getting the information out there. I also find that a lot of the parents are, especially parents, I guess, um, in supporting their loved one with compassion, you know, they've tried everything they know, and their loved one is being defiant, whatever, not taking their meds, or drinking while taking their meds or other things, and they don't know what to do and they don't know where to turn. And, helping them understand that you can be compassionate with your loved one, but still keep um, a straight and narrow path that has to be followed. Um, in order for their loved one to survive and get past the stigma and want want to be healthy, want to be in recovery. Recovery is not talked about a lot, um, because sometimes when we notice when they're really sick, but when they're doing well, a lot of times we forget. And what family members have shared is when their loved one is doing well, what they feel like is, oh, now we're having a normal life. And they forget that that loved one needs to be encouraged and supported during that time period, and being um, I can't think of the word, encourage their loved ones that they're doing the right thing, and you're proud of them for doing the right thing, even though the biggest complaint we hear is, I don't like the way the medications make me feel, whether it affects my weight, it affects my sleep. It doesn't affect my sleep, and I want it to. Um, I sweat, or I get the shakes. Those are all things that are very real to the person who has the mental illness. And then the family members are also dealing with the fact that um, if their family member is shaking and shaking uncontrollably, or have little glitches, that sometimes is kind of embarrassing. And um, and how do you make that a normal thing and let the people know that it is okay? Um, Another class we teach is finding and using local supports and services, and that's where family to family um, classes, and then the family and family support groups come in, um, to find out what's there to help them. So many times the family is so focused on their loved one that they can't see how their reaction is impacting their loved one, and they they want their loved one to be okay, but in the process they've become sick themselves, in becoming either an enabler, um, or an angry person. Maybe they're not even involved with their kids anymore, or their loved one. A lot of times when parents or loved ones reach out for help, it's when they're at their end. Nothing seems to be working. Um, we also touch on information on their mental health conditions and how it affects the brain. And, this is an area that is very prevalent in my life. I really like talking about the fact that mental illness is a brain disorder. Your brain is one of your organs. It's just like if you have a heart disorder, or diabetes or something like that. It's not identical, but some illnesses are more acceptable than others. And if you've got somebody that's paranoid schizophrenic or schizoaffective disorder, major depressive disorder, they can't get out of bed, they don't work, they don't up, for my brother, he didn't have any social skills. Um, it was really hard on the family to understand. And my mom's thought process up until the day she died was, if only we would have taken the other brother, if he would have taken Dwight with him when he went out to eat and that, and showed him how to behave, and they don't understand that the other people involved, the other children involved in the family, don't know how to deal with this either. And it's not their job to um, teach the other person, the person that's suffering from a mental health issue. It's not a matter of being able to take them out to eat and learn how to, which fork to use and which how to be appropriate in your discussion. By the time people come to us, they're beyond that. So we talk about it being a brain disorder because that's understandable. If somebody tells you that they have a heart condition, we have empathy for them. We offer services for them. We accept that, like I have asthma and I have COPD. Well, there's some expectations that people have that know that with COPD, I am not going to be able to do a lot of stairs, um, carry a lot. Um, the weather changes, affects my breathing. Well, with a mental illness, your brain is affected. You're not getting enough of your like dopamine or serotonin. Things are not the medicine that your brain automatically provides. Um, it's just hard to understand. And unfortunately, mental illness has been around for a long time, and we've gone through a lot, and we've made a lot of improvements, but we are still so far behind. Um, Another topic that we discuss is how to handle the crisis. By the time the family member is coming to family or family group, you know, they see crisis as, and it's just like, oh, okay, here we go again. This is another big deal. What didn't they do? What did they do? Did I say something wrong? You know, crises are going to happen. And just like for me with my asthma, if the weather changes or the allergies, or if the wind blows and stirs up dust, I'm going to have a reaction. Well, similar things happen with people with a mental health condition, in the fact that life sometimes happens to them and they are not, um, it disrupts their ability to function and how to deal with it. They don't know what to do, and they're not sure whether they need to be talking to their med provider or their case manager or their therapist. They're all, they just want to be better, and they don't want to have all this stigma behind them. Um, we talk a lot about the different treatment and therapies, and we also include in that the fact that, you know, for in our situation, the people that are involved with AOT, they're all over 18, which means they can choose not to let their parents or their loved ones be a part of it, or they can choose to let them, or they can choose to sign the releases and let them be a part of it. And one of the things that we've seen in the year and a half or so we've been doing it is parents come in and they're very frustrated, and they want, say, for instance, just an eye opener. I just really want my son or daughter to get out of my house and be live on their own. Now, these kids are they're still calling them sons and daughters. Their kids, are 45 years old or whatever. And mom and dad, whoever, are just wanting a little bit of a break. Well, then when we get the people, the AOT participants, when we get them their own place and they start becoming self-sufficient, and it's a long process. I'm not saying it happens overnight. As soon as they get an apartment, they become, they know what to do. That does not happen. But what does happen is when that participant starts to improve and engage and be more a part of their own recovery system, then the parent feels left out. So then they come in and they want, well, now wait a minute, my son won't or my daughter won't let me, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, you can't have it both ways. You either want them to move on, or you want them to stay there. And this is what you asked for, and this is good for them. And the important thing right now is to support it, even if you don't agree with everything. And that's kind of hard. But when they come to family, they find out they're not the only ones that feel that way. Um, and then we talk about how mental health conditions impact the entire family. So it's not only the person with the mental illness that has struggles, but then maybe their siblings. I know in my case, it was like suddenly I didn't have any parents because they were so involved with the brother that was sick that I was kind of left to my own devices. And my older brother was gone. He went, it was during Vietnam. So then it seems like we went from a five-person family down to just three people, my parents and the person that was sick, my brother. And, that just changes the dynamics. And I can tell you that I went to my 30th class reunion 20 years ago, and there were people in my class. We thought, or I thought, that they had hidden my brother's diagnosis very well and that nobody knew how sick he was and what was going on. Well, when I got to that 30th class reunion, they were surprised that I was still alive. They knew the whole time that things were not okay at our house. They didn't know what it was. Um, and, you know, it was like an eye opener for me with, well, it's no wonder that I didn't have the relationships because number one, we didn't have support systems back then. And number two, um, people were keeping their kids away because they didn't know what was going on and they didn't know about it. And it wasn't until 2005 that I even knew about NAMI. And, in 2005, I was, 50 years old or somewhere around there. And this had been going on with my brother for 40 years. It's like even the much education as I have, and I've learned because I did get into learning about how this affects us. Um, it was just one of those areas that, wow, that stigma is still a little bit there. Um, and the other thing that my role as an AOT person is, if the family member comes in, the judge usually lets me know um, whether they want me to take the family member out in the other room and talk to them about NAMI and about what they can do to help themselves, or whether they're okay with the family member being in the courtroom during AOT. And as Itzel had said before, a lot of it depends on whether they follow the judge's rules about letting the participant share. Let them tell their story. Um, because no matter, they're the only ones that are living it. And although you may be, as a parent, witnessing it, you still don't know all the ins and outs of what's going on with your loved one. And so it's just really important. And so the judge makes that decision, or um, if the participant doesn't want their parent in there and there's any kind of issue, I just take them out and start talking to them because they need to be heard too. And that's, as family members, they need to know that they're allowed to be heard and that they have their feelings and they're not right or wrong, and they're very normal to be frustrated and wondering, because by the time people get into AOT, they've had problems for quite a while. They don't take their meds. They're socially, you know, um, some of them are socially outcast. Some of them are um, um, homeless, have trouble keeping track of a home. They don't take their medications because they don't understand it. So we get these people when they're at their lowest, really. And, the parents have already dealt with them for many years and they're just frustrated. And we're seeing them for the first time. And it's like, okay, we got to get the parent to understand that the most important thing they need to do is to take care of themselves. Because if they don't take care of themselves, they have nothing to offer. And usually, by the time their loved one joins AOT and gets to become a participant, the family members are really tired and frustrated, and they don't have any hope. And so that's our job, is to give those family members hope that, you know, other people have done this. We have success stories. We always have somebody come in and talk about, what happened in their family. It's just important for family members to understand that they're not alone, you know, just like the consumer is not alone with being one with a mental illness. The family members, the parents, the siblings, um, are not alone either. And so that's um, kind of my job. So that's what I do. And, the biggest thing is in my opinion, is the expectations, because the parents still want that child, or at least my mom did. She just wanted her son to be normal. And it just was never going to happen. And it never did after he was 17. It just he never became normal. And um, that's hard for a parent to realize, that number one, they didn't cause it, they didn't create it, it wasn't in their genes. It's just how it works. So with that, I guess I've done a little bit of the family and family support group. Sorry.
No,
I
you're
was
no,
just
no, you're fine. Thank you, Gina. Uh, when you are working with these family members, have you noticed a difference once they start getting involved in the NAMI family to family or family support group?
well, number one, their eyes get opened, and you know, yeah, what they see, first of all, they have to be heard. The first couple of meetings, we're talking about how they feel, how they respond, and then we get into what can you do for you to help you. And and so when their families come into crisis, usually even in the 8-week period that we have classes, there's at least 4 or 5 crises that happen during that time with different family members. And so, that number one gives them the sight that, what, this happens. It happens to everybody. Things are not perfect all the time. And just because you're in crisis doesn't mean you have to go back to the very beginning. You can start where you are and move forward. And being able to allow other people to help that loved one. There's nothing nothing. I mean, I witnessed so many moms and dads at their wits' ends and not knowing what to do. Um, that utter helplessness that they feel. By the time they leave family to family, they have got, 6 or 8 other families that they're now friends with, that they can talk to, that they feel supported from. Yeah, it's a major difference. And most of the families that I've had have moved forward. But anytime I see them out at Walmart or that, man, they're just like, oh, and they'll say how their loved one is doing, or, well, they're not doing too good this week, or it's been kind of rough. And it's like, okay, just remember what you learned, and encouraging them to realize that life happens.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you. I think, and as Gina said, here the next slide, we'll be discussing a little bit more about the programs that NAMI offers for family members. But it's true, I have also noticed the difference in family members once after they've at least gone through a family to family class or they've attended a couple support group meetings, because as Gina said, they gain that support from other family members that are experiencing similar things. They learn that they're not alone. It's not just their child or their husband that's going through these difficulties. It's a lot of people around them. They're experiencing very similar things. So thank you, Gina, um,
You're welcome.
for that.
Yeah.
So I'd like to share the NAMI Kansas mission statement because it's dedicated to improving the quality of life for people with mental illness and their families through support, education, and advocacy. And we work a lot with peers in making sure peers are receiving the resources and the support that they need. But sometimes we might forget that we should also be offering the same thing for family members, making sure they're supported, that they're receiving education, and there's, either they are advocating for change or we are helping them advocate for that, for their loved one, for whatever it could be, um, that they need. Something that's very important as a family member with someone with a mental illness is taking care of yourself. In order to take care of your loved one, you first need to be taking care of yourself, and that's physically and that's mentally. In our family to family class and our family support group, we like to use the example of when you're on an airplane, they always explain to you, put your oxygen mask on first before you try to help someone else put theirs on. And that's very similar to a family member with someone with a mental illness. You need to make sure your oxygen mask is on and you're paying attention to your needs before you help your family member. And oftentimes, even as Gina said, these family members they're probably in crisis. And in our family, are either family to family or family support group, we have a document and we let everyone know, like, where are you? Those emotional stages. Are you in crisis? Are you better? What can we do to help you? And a lot of the times, and if you go to the support group or you're in our educational class, you get asked, so how are you doing today? At what stage are you at? Because if someone's in crisis, it's like, okay, what can we do now to help you? And a lot of the times, family members going into either their first class or their first support group, they're in that crisis mode. They don't know what to expect. They don't know anything about the mental illness. Or oftentimes, family members, when they're that first time that they reach out to mental health professionals, they haven't even received information or education themselves. Maybe they Googled, like, what is schizophrenia? And of course, WebMD came out with this like answer, or now they're worried, they're stressing themselves out because they truly don't know what is going on. And they're in that crisis mode. All they want to do is help their loved one, but they also need those resources. And that is where we recommend for a lot of families to take NAMI Family to Family. And NAMI Family to Family is an 8-week educational course. It could be, as we discussed, family members are not just biological family. It could be close friends, partners, children, grandparents, wherever it is, that family member of a person with a mental illness. They can reach out to receive more information on NAMI Family to Family. So, for example, in Kansas, we most affiliates they try to have in-person classes whenever available, but NAMI Kansas does offer virtual groups at least 3 to 4 times a year. Uh, um, and during this 8-week educational course, they are learning a lot of things that they really didn't expect. So the class starts off with, again, like any other class, with those introductions and getting to know each other, and then we move into really learning how the brain works, learning about medication, learning about different diagnoses. And of course, in this 8-week course, we can't go through everything, but we do go through the major things like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety. And we, during this class, the program leaders are going through this material, and it gives them, it's typically about 90 minutes is how long these classes are. And during this time, a family member has the possibility to ask questions, to be part of discussions, maybe have a one-on-one with the leader if they need more time. And as we learn through about the brain and diagnoses and such, we eventually get into more so of maybe those solutions. So, how to talk to a medical provider, how to talk to a therapist, and even, I can't remember if it's class 5 or 6, but we do discuss AOT and how AOT could help an individual with a severe mental illness. And oftentimes it used to be like, okay, what is AOT, and how do I help my family member get involved in this? And now in Kansas, we're able to, if they're in those counties that are part of that have AOT now, we could be like, okay, well, um, actually, you're in a county that has AOT. Maybe you should contact your local mental health center and start asking more questions. Maybe get that conversation started if they want to learn more about AOT. And we, during this class also, it's really explained that mental illness is not the fault of the family member, but it's also not the fault of the loved one with the mental illness. A lot of individuals, they go in, they really don't know what to expect out of mental illness. They don't know what the diagnosis consists of. They have all these questions, and during family to family, they learn to not put the blame on themselves or their loved one. It just happens. It's something biological. It's just as sometimes a person develops diabetes or heart issues and such. It's the same thing, same concept with mental illness. It could eventually happen, and no one is to blame. So with NAMI Family to Family, we really do encourage any family members to get involved, to take the class, because they do learn a lot. And oftentimes, especially if it's a broken family unit and we have a participant in AOT who has no connection with a family member, if somehow, some way, this family member is able to receive information about NAMI to Family, and maybe all they have to do is take the class to better understand their loved one with the mental illness, to then become a supportive family member. Because at the end of the day, the person that experienced the mental illness, they need all the support that they could get. And they're receiving that support from their treatment team, but sometimes that support is also needed from their social relationships. That includes family members or maybe friends. Um, and family to family is a great first step to help family members receive that education, um, and also receive that support. As Gina stated, a lot of the times after someone goes through a family to family course, they make friends, or they at least make acquaintances with people that they know are experiencing very similar things to what they are. And then we also have NAMI Family Support Group, and this is a peer-led support group that is led by a family member or a caregiver of someone with mental illness. And this is is not as doesn't have that weekly structure as NAMI Family to Family. Typically, the support group is set up with as often as the group leaders determine. So it could be every week, it could be every other week, once a month, whatever it is that the volunteers are able to work into their schedule. And a family NAMI family support group could either 60 minutes to 90 minutes for any adult over the age of 18 that has someone with a mental illness, some concern of a mental health condition. And with our NAMI groups, it doesn't have to be an officially diagnosed mental health condition. A lot of the times people, when they do a quick Google search on where to find resources because they think their family members might be experiencing something. Oftentimes they find information on NAMI Family to Family or NAMI Family Support Group. So if a person doesn't have official mental health diagnosis yet, that is completely fine. We still encourage family members, friends, partners to reach out and to be involved in either our support groups or our educational groups. In the support group, it's also structured. We also have those emotional stages. We have a lot of resources that we also hand out to family members. And what we see is a family member will go through the NAMI Family to Family course, and they learn all this information, and then after that they start attending a support group because they've realized that they don't have to be alone during this journey. There's other individuals that understand what they're going through, and or we have family members that will take family to family multiple times. We have people that take it every year just because they like that refresher, they like that support. And everyone's journey is different. And what we like to see is when family members go through our resources, um, they sometimes when they really enjoy them and their loved one has recovered, they're doing great in their mental health journey, they themselves decide to get trained and then start offering these support groups or these educational groups. And our NAMI groups are completely free. They're no charge to anyone that's involved, and this includes reaching out to resources. We also have a hotline that's a resource line, I should say, that a NAMI Kansas resource line, and there's a NAMI national one as well. And most of the times, the once you call this hotline, they'll help you find resources in the area. That includes NAMI resources as well as other mental health resources. And these are things that we teach in the support group and that are taught also in family to family. And we just like to give that overall support to the family members because oftentimes they don't know what is going on, and what they seek is education and support for themselves, and eventually they get to a point where they would also like to advocate for this. And this is great because if they're advocating at the state level, then we know we're eventually going to start seeing some changes in the system. And this is what we love to see when family members get involved. And I know it's difficult. Not every AOT participant or person with a mental illness has a healthy relationship with their family. And sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes we start off and they don't want to have their family involved or have their family know anything about what's going on. But sometimes, maybe down the line, a couple months, it's okay to ask those questions again. It's okay to ask a participant or a consumer, a client, uh, right now, how are you feeling with your family? How's that relationship? Are you interested in having a family member be more involved with your mental health journey? Because sometimes down the road, after they've been receiving treatment and they've been going to their appointments, they might change their mind and they might realize that maybe their family member was trying to help them all along. And this is not the case for everyone. We understand that some people have really toxic relationships with their family members, but there's also some family units that were impacted by just that onset of the symptoms, and maybe that's when the family started breaking apart, and maybe that's why their family members don't have a good relationship. And as Gina stated, maybe at the beginning the family member was either they were confused, they were angry, they didn't know what to do, and they probably treated loved one with a mental illness not well. You know, they were maybe said some things, some mean things, or they discriminated against them. But uh, somehow trying to tie them back in, helping them receive resources, helping them receive education is important because we want to see when we're working with AOT participants, we want to see them being able to get as much support as necessary. And it's not just for AOT individuals, anyone really with mental health conditions. We want to see them have a support system. And with NAMI, we like helping with that. We like providing education for family members and helping them understand that mental illness is not their fault. It's not the fault of the family member either. It just happens, and it's important to be educated and to provide that support for your loved one, and also for the family member. And with that is all the information we had for you today. We just really think it's important in with NAMI, we think it's important to have family members be part of the conversation whenever it's possible, whenever the relationships are not toxic or they're not hurting or damaging the individual with mental illness in any way. So if anyone is interested or it ever comes up, it doesn't have to be for an AOT participant. You want to learn more about NAMI Family to Family, NAMI Family Support Group, or you have someone that you know would completely benefit out of this, you could reach out to me. You could reach out to any of the AOT specialists in the area, and we will try to get you connected with resources to the best of our ability, in person or virtual. So now I would like to open it up to questions in case anyone has any questions. You could also drop those in the chat box, or you could unmute yourself if you would like. And let's see. Okay. I think Chris might have already dropped the link for the CEU information, but if you could all please, if you're interested in receiving that CEU, if you could please fill out that evaluation. And then we have the CU link also included in that. And if anyone can't see it in the chat, let me know and I can resend it. But we have that evaluation link in the chat and that CU certificate, and it is password protected. And if anyone has any issues with the either the CU link or you don't receive your certificate, please let me know and I could go in and send it to you myself. I know sometimes, as we've noticed this morning, sometimes that technology is a little weird, but I appreciate you all for logging in. And if you have any questions, please email me, give me a call, whatever you need. We really are here to provide support for um, anyone in our communities. And a recording for this will be sent out hopefully next week. And if not, it will be right after Thanksgiving.